may demand for, and what the government may carry as palliatives for the removal of subsidy. Lastly, again, to that question, if in your own opinion it is to be maintained, what are your readiness and state of mind to convince this Senate, and indeed, of course, Nigerians, that it is worth to maintain it, and how you are going to clip all the issues surrounding corruption around the issue of subsidy? Thank you very much.
Dr. Kachikwu, you can take those questions.
First, on the issue of subsidy, because there's a lot of interest in it, let me deal with that first. If you ask anybody from the private sector whether he thinks subsidy should remain, I think you're going to get a categorical no. And so there isn't you can't embellish that. But having said that, and I think in my conversations with His Excellency, the President, he understands that, he gets it. He's been a petroleum minister before. But one of the things he's very deeply worried about is if you take away this subsidy without adequate plan on the palliatives, like you just mentioned, what is going to be the impact on the populace? And so we're having a continuing dialogue on this. I think we're both determined that at some point in time, given the sheer effects on the national economy of subsidy today, something will have to happen to subsidy. But we're doing a couple of things. First, we're doing an analysis in terms of subsidy at what number? Do we consume 40 million liters, like the data says, or do we consume 25? Were those bloated numbers? My 6 weeks there is showing me that I'm closer to 30 million liters than I am to 40 million in terms of the actual number of million liters of fuel. And so to that extent, that is already a 25% drop in the subsidy number. You have the cost in terms of demurrage. Can we be more efficient and wipe that out? Because that's about a 25% factor. We're looking at that. Then you have the bank interest. Now, if we can find a financing mechanism that enables us to fund as and when due the interventions by independent marketers and this stuff, that's also a reduction. But at the end of the day, the problem with subsidy at the end of the day is that if you don't handle it well, without the palliatives, you have a response. Some of the things we're doing is, what are the palliatives? National health scheme touches every Nigerian. Railway development all over the country touches every Nigerian. Power development touches every Nigerian. Transportation, subsidy at transportation points in terms of cost of transport, subsidy in motor tickets or whatever, or transport tickets. So we're looking at all kinds of palliatives. I think my understanding is that the President is a lot more minded in attacking subsidy once you've been able to deal with the palliative issues, rather than simply yanking it out. So my duty in the short term is first to continue that dialogue and get him comfortable with it. Two, and I think he knows where I stand on this, but two, and more important, to also be able to help him develop a comfort factor on those palliatives. Then three, get subsidy to a level where you can say that this is the actual cost of subsidy, because there's a lot of fraud that went into the subsidy scheme. If you strip it of the fraud, what really is the subsidy? I mean, if at the end of that analysis, for example, we find that the subsidy element is not more than 10 naira. The question anybody will ask you is 10 naira too much an amount to give to your citizens? And can you fund that subsidy through other mechanisms? But if it turns out, as the data are indicating currently before the research, that you're subsidizing products at about 40 naira, clearly the effect on ability of state governments to be able to do, the loss to FAC and the ability of state governments to do their work becomes unbearable. So there's first a research that needs to happen, there's a dialogue that needs to happen, and we're going to get to the end road of the game. I think we're all alarmed by the effect of subsidy. And he, probably a lot more than I do, he carries the executive mantle on this. So rest assured, distinguished senators, that it's something we're working around the clock. Now, my distinguished Senate Minority Leader, a man I'm very fond of, did ask me about unbundling. Will I support unbundling of bureaucracy at the federal level? Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. And I could even stop there. It is that germane. And I think the president is very committed to that. Now, the first test of him trying to do that was to say he was going to appoint less ministers. But the rules didn't let him do that. But I think that was the first signal he gave that he was sick and tired of the multiferations of agencies. So I think in the process of unbundling, this distinguished hollow chamber also has a responsibility. The responsibility to look at the laws that pertain to these issues and help fashion laws and changes in laws that will enable those unbundling take place. I was challenged, for example, in terms of the individuals that I let go and what have I provided for them. These sort of arguments are also going to happen when he unbundles. What happens to the 5,000 or 10,000 federal government staffers that are going to be let go? We must have a process, which is what we're doing in NNPC now, of how do you retrain, how do you rekit, how do you retool, how do you provide facilities for the individuals who were let go. But if we continue to be tied to the prison yard of no changes because of the ramifications of what makes business sense, this country will grind to a halt. And so we have to be bold enough to take the political will to do the changes. And in any revolution, you will have individuals who may well be innocent in the process of a change. But that's the way it is. If this was a private company, that's the way it will be. All that you owe your staff will be, how do you ensure that in their going process, their entitlements are well paid, their retirement packages are well paid. And by the way, NNPC has one of the best retirement packages in this country. So, with every due respect, distinguished Senator, I hear your emotions. We are doing the best we can to have standards on which these decisions are made. But without those decisions, I'll be here explaining to you in 6 months' time why nothing has happened in NNPC. Exploration in the oil in the north, I think I already handled. Whether it's Benue, whether it's Chad, I think I already dealt with that issue. The one on gas flaring is key. I am very, I mean, apart from being somebody from the south, for whom the environment is a major concern, gas flaring cannot be a commercial way of dealing with issues. And so although we've approached gas flaring from a position of penalties for flared gas, we need to begin to look at taking away flaring from a position of investment in the translation of flare to money. To stop flare, you need investments. A lot of that money is not there. So we need to provide a national master gas plan, which must be gazetted, a gas plan which must be put into statute to enable us to move forward. The single most important deterrent to gas development in this country is the absence of policies, the absence of statutes, the absence of a master plan, the absence of incentives. And unfortunately, every country in the world is leaving us behind. Qatar, Doha, the UAE. Every country in the world is leaving us and moving fairly rapidly into their gas development. We need to create the right incentives to take this up immediately because the era of oil is beginning to slide. And this is one of the areas I'm going to put a lot of energy in ensuring that we begin to focus on gas, both for local consumption and for external support. Because once the markets are clogged, and all those markets, and gas are long-term markets, if you don't sign on to them now, in 10 years when you're ready, there'll be no market to take them, and you're left with your gas.
Is it the wish of the Senate that the nominee cannot take it? You can take your leave now.
Well, there you have it. Another record set there. We just were saying just before he started, that nominee started, that former Governor Fashola had set the benchmark with an hour, and here it is, it's blown away.
And it was a really, really interesting, time. learning. I don't know about you, but I learned several things about the petroleum industry. And I like what he said about the PIB. The PIB has languished in the National Assembly for years. The 6th Assembly, the 7th Assembly, the 8th Assembly. So I'm kind of, it's interesting what his take was on.